Hey everyone, back today to play a little more Cities Skylines 2. We're here working, and this is a voiceover here, so I've got some footage cut together. I did a couple things, and I've got the footage sped up. But our ultimate goal here today is I'm kind of working on a few things that I didn't like, so I'm replacing them or just taking them out, and then starting to build the infrastructure for sort of a rural town off to the side on the other side of this little barrier island. And towards the end of the video, you'll see that. But for now, we're just working on a couple additions and fixes to the sort of main city here. So I started, as you can see, with trying to use up some more of the space we had right by the entrance. I did two sort of little access roads parallel down and then right up to where the bridge starts, and then went over. On the left side is probably a little more industry space, and then here on the right side, as you can see, I'm working. I put in a sort of curve to follow the coast to the right there, and then I just divided up that bigger spot with some 2-lane alley roads. And I had this spot laid out, and I built a road that sort of followed the coast that I imagined might have, already been there from when this was a smaller city. People probably would have, just been traveling along the coast or whatnot, and eventually that was turned into a road. But then I realized afterwards that the terrain was really sort of bumpy and uneven here, and I'd forgotten about that. So I went back and smoothed out the terrain, deleted those roads, and then kind of changed my mind a little bit once it was smooth. I wanted to, I say square this off, not really square it off, but put in some corners to kind of add this to the bottom of the grid, finish smoothing out the terrain there. And then I thought that the road would be a little further away from the coast. And then I wanted it to travel up straight here to kind of go by the coast, give us some access to those coastal areas, but not be right up against it, and then get us back over to the main parts of the city and ultimately lead us towards expanding out towards our rural settlement. So here, once again, I had some alley roads that I built along the coast there to use up some more of that space. I imagine they'd be smaller roads where people had just over time decided to use the land and had individual businesses or whatnot. I don't know what I'll end up putting there. Probably not housing, but yeah. And then in this big open space here, I wanted to make it kind of irregular. So I put those sort of stair-step looking alley roads to fill that space in and use it all up. Going back to this extra grid I added on, I'm doing a lot of looking around here, trying to decide what I want to do. I wanted to smooth out after doing so much terrain modification and leveling. I wanted to kind of soften those edges a little bit. And then I come back to this grid that I added on, and I kind of like the idea, but I felt it was a little too regular and too big. We've already got sort of a lot of similar grid going on in the main part of the city, right in the entrance that we started. So I felt like the big blocks was a little too samey. So I deleted the inner parts, and ultimately I'll come back to that. I have a couple ideas I want to explore there on how to do something more unique, but still can be part of the city. But then I moved on. I started doing a lot more leveling out towards this side of the island just to make this space usable. In reality, the town wouldn't level everything quite this aggressively, even a really big town, which this is not. But in Cities Skylines, the assets just kind of looks a little janky if the ground is too one level. It does some kind of really arbitrary leveling right under the building, and I just don't like the look of that. So did a little pre-leveling, but I didn't want to make everything totally smooth, so I leveled out that little sort of plateau on top, then left a little bit of a elevation hillside that we'll have to climb to get to. Then I bought a couple extra tiles, as you can see, to extend and give us range on most of the rest of the island. Expand this plateau out, and then do some more leveling on different levels. So this sort of valley level is about level with the city. And then we have the big plateau I made a moment ago, and then the second plateau in the top right that I'm smoothing now, or I was smoothing a moment ago. This one is it's at a in-between elevation, so it's lower than that first one, but still higher than the main valley level. And then this, I think I was trying to just smooth it down a lot, and I realized, oh, I need to actually level it because things will only smooth so far. So, kind of don't want it to be perfectly, leveled out in unrealistic ways, but wanted to give us some flat spots to work with. So we've got a couple different elevations working here, and then I'm just softening all the terrain here. And then leveling this little hill out as well, so we still have some hills to contend with, but nothing too insane. Soften these edges up where they're gonna meet the city, and then try to smooth everything out to make it look a little less artificial. A lot of smoothing going on here. So once I was done with that, I started trying to think, how am I gonna get to this little settlement? It's gonna have to be connected for power and whatnot, so I thought this 4-lane road would sort of extend on, and I figured this kind of bisects the island, not perfectly evenly, but I figured this road would have sort of been put in place to let you travel from one side of the island to the other. And so I made the 4-lane road. Then I thought, well, 4 lanes is a little bit aggressive for, heading all the way out to this rural area. So I kind of went back, wanted it to be a little more curvy to follow the terrain a little more naturally. And I also made it a 2-lane road. So we've got this sort of, I imagine it's kind of maybe a rural highway. Still just 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction. But it takes us sort of out of the city and over to this little rural town. So I had the idea that I want sort of a small grid, like a couple, for lack of a better word, city block style spots for some development in the middle of this rural area, and then around it would be all sort of farmland and really sort of more dispersed and spread out housing. And I might try to build some suburbs. In my part of the country, at least, had a lot of farmland, and then farmer will sell the land or a big piece of land, and then someone comes in and they build a neighborhood. And so it's kind of just plopped right in, all houses that seem very similar, all right next to each other in one sort of big blob, and then everything else around it seems to be unaffected. So I kind of wanted to represent that as well. As you can see, I played around with trying to think, what would this look like with the terrain? What kind of roads would have come in and been natural, built up over time instead of all at once like I'm doing it now. So I decided the farmland probably would have been the first thing out here. Very spread out, not a lot of roads. So I ended up deleting that cross street that I had originally, and I started working with small alleys to represent, again, sort of rural roads that had been paved ultimately. And I wanted these sort of big sweeping curves that will, that just kind of divide up the land, got people, where they were trying to go more directly back when this was undeveloped, more than, building a grid where you have to kind of navigate where you want to go. I figured, there's a farm here, there's a farm there. Well, the guy with the farm up here probably would have just driven straight down to the road more often than not if he had to leave. And so I kind of wanted to represent that with these more curving and organic shapes. Then here you see I'm trying to implement that grid I was talking about and have it look like it kind of maybe was built up a little bit over time. I imagine this would be kind of a little bit of a town square type thing. I don't want it to be super industrial or super built up with like high rises or big tall apartment buildings. I still imagined it would just kind of be a small town center with some shops, probably some businesses, but nothing too huge, more like old family businesses or small businesses, a motor repair shop and an auto parts store and a feed store for animals and farming stuff. A sort of smaller, more modest type of places. So once I got started here, you can see I'm doing a little more leveling, a lot of leveling and landscaping, terrain changing in this episode. And then I wanted to extend the roads out even more. So I start to extend the roads, trying to make, there's me, I keep confusing, or I should say forgetting when I have the straight road tool selected or the curved road tool selected. So fairly often you'll see that I try to make one or the other, and once I go to click to place it, it's still curving or still straight or whatnot. So you see here I was sort of fiddling around. I wanted this road to follow, even though the contour lines and the elevation is not all that extreme here. I kind of wanted to follow that little indentation to make it seem more organic. And I end up liking the shape that came out of it. Kind of a strange, unbalanced kind of looking shape, but I figured that's kind of realistic. They wouldn't be building roads for how they look altogether. They'd be building them just to get somewhere and divide up the land. So then you see I extended another road out onto this plateau. And then I wanted to make some sort of connections with dirt roads. These are kind of less, I mean, I guess people would be traveling along them, but more just to delineate, oh, hey, these are parcels of land. Each one of these little spots that's closed off in roads probably was a farm, and someone owned the land in here at one time, or maybe now, as you'll see. We still have some farms set up. I thought this lower spot would be good to extend a road out. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it, but again, I was thinking kind of sort of low density commercial, maybe almost like the suburbs maybe of the city we have going. Once it's built up and bigger, you kind of go out and further down the island and have the suburbs sort of still packed in and kind of urban, but mostly housing. And then you get even further and you have this tiny town center with a lot of farms and very spread out stuff all around it. Here I started to kind of feel like the grid I had set up, it just didn't quite look right being placed right in the middle the way it was. I don't know exactly what I didn't like about it. I think it just seemed kind of unbalanced, like too perfectly in the middle of the island. And I just felt like it being hemmed in inside this sort of kind of triangular road just felt too planned, and something didn't sit right with me. So I tried to edit it a little bit, and then ultimately, I believe, as you'll see here, I start looking at trying to get some businesses, and then as you can see, I go for smaller kind of things. I am placing them all along the road with some space between them rather than zoning in every single bit. And then I move over to the farming. So created a farm here. I believe this one was a vegetable farm, maybe. I kind of fiddle a little bit of back and forth here, trying to decide what's the best, look for where this farm would realistically be. And then here, as you can see, I kind of decided, okay, I don't like this. What if the grid, I think originally I was saying, what if the grid was bigger? Or maybe on both sides of the road? But then ultimately, as you'll see, I removed that zoning and I end up removing the grid to the north, or at least as we're seeing the screen right now, to the north completely. And I believe I put a farm there. So here I'm just trying to think a little bit more about the spacing. What size of buildings would I want? What size of lots and businesses would I want in this area? I wouldn't want the blocks to be way too big or have too much space between streets. So then you can see I ultimately ended up adding a farm here. And then I realized I sort of started placing this field wrong way around. I guess should go counterclockwise instead of clockwise. So the zone was kind of messed up at the end, so I just redid it here. I wanted to leave some space along the sides of the road because at least I say in real life, in the part of the country I'm from in the United States, the farmland often goes pretty close to the road, but almost always there's some space. I assume that the city or the county owns that has like a ditch for drainage off the road or whatnot, so it's usually not right up to the roadways. It's almost always set back, 5 or 10 feet from the road, with just some grass and whatever growing. So I tried to replicate that with that first farm I placed. And then here something went weird with the farm when I was placing it. I just deleted it, started over. And then once again, I wanted to leave some space. The farm building I kind of imagine is more like a farmhouse. And so, you wouldn't have fields and every point on, right up to your house or your living area. So I wanted to leave that kind of chunk undone. And then here, as you can see, this is the strange thing. It's sort of not, I don't know what the deal was, but it sort of won't build the building. And it's saying it doesn't have a road access. So then I upgraded the road, that didn't work. And something about the way I was placing it, I believe I had Anarchy on and I had forgotten and left it on at this point. So it may have had something to do with that. But then I replaced this one. Once again, if you were living in that farm building, you'd want to have a yard. Probably a family and kids and stuff playing around. So space to park your cars and hang out and do stuff. So here I went for a little bit smaller of a field. And then I came over trying to add in some of the trees and growth that you would see along the road. This is the place that's too close to the road to farm, especially with big equipment. You got to have space to turn around. You want to be able to do, if you're plowing or harvesting, you don't want sharp corners as much, so you kind of wouldn't go into this corner as much, even if there was a little space for it. And you'd have that little strip on the side of the road. So I wanted to have some trees. I wanted a variety of trees. The brush I initially used was a little too strong, and I kind of go in and try to make it a little more sporadic. And then looking for some more types of trees. Having a really hard time getting the brush to place in the space between that I left here. But these are hickory trees. Here I went back to the brush. Just placing every individual one was a little much. I think that is the point where I turned Anarchy off. Or on. No, it's definitely off, so I think that might have been part of the problem with that farm building I was building before. And here you see I'm just trying to just furiously get the right pixel placement to get some trees in. And then I just decided to kind of leave it. And here I'm moving really fast, just trying to not make the trees too thick, but also spread them out. And then here I think I was looking for more like wild bushes, sort of stuff that no one's taken care of, right? The farmer's he just doesn't want it on his field. So growing along the side, he's not necessarily doing a ton of maintenance all the time to keep it trimmed down. And then here I wanted, oftentimes you'll have sort of a tractor path I've found where straight from the fields it'll just go onto the road. It's usually sometimes it's even just dirt where they drive off the fields onto the road, or it'll be, like a little bit of a dirt road with the real intersection or whatnot. But I wanted to replicate that here, messing around with the surface painter, which I hadn't really used, trying to find out what each one looks like, and also how, I think here I was struggling to learn how do I delete a surface. And then I was like, well, whatever, I'll just put this one on top. Nope, can't do that. And then ultimately I realized, yeah, you just hover over and right click on the node, and once you're down to, I guess, just 2 nodes, it just disappears. So here I'm checking out the road options. I didn't know which one exactly I wanted, or I should say which one did what I wanted. Then road services ends up being the thing I was looking for, because I was trying to remove this crosswalk. I believe I remove all of them because, again, this isn't like an official cross street. This is just where someone drives the tractor onto the road. Not really meant to be a real intersection. So, and here I'm messing with the surfaces again, and now here I'm trying to make it look a little less uniform. Like I said, it sort of a lot of times it's just a dirt patch. It's not paved, and I was trying to replicate that. And then ultimately I said to myself, I was saying to myself that just having the dirt path even looked too specific and put together. So if I just use the surface painter to kind of make dirt and a dirt little cut through, it still goes over the sidewalk and is a little noticeable, but I kind of like the look of it versus having the road anyway. We may end end up going back for some more detailing, but for now, that's where I leave that one. And here I ended up expanding out this farmland to use more of the fertile land that I have available. I decided, well, we'll change it up. This one, let's just imagine this farmer, he's going for maximum ROI. He's trying to get the most yield he can. And I wanted to use up more of this sort of road chunk I have. With the range of the farm building there, you see I was going too far out, so I'll do a little tweaking here, but this is about as big as I can make it in terms of distance from the farm building. So I just made it about as big as I could, still leaving room for some housing or whatnot on the other end. Or I should say against the other road to the left there. And then cleaning up the edges a little bit. And that was pretty much it. As you can see, we have kind of a nice organic looking, kind of random look that I'm really enjoying. We're going to expand on this some more, but for now, that's the end of the episode. Make sure to leave a comment if you have any suggestions for changes or things I should do next. And please, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave me a like. Subscribe to my channel. I'll be putting out more videos, continue in this town going forward. And I'll see you next time.